The rain pattered softly against the window, casting a faint shadow on the walls. But there was something else in the quiet. A secret, long buried. A key, stolen and hidden, had been passed down through generations, its true purpose known only to those who dared uncover it. Now, the truth is about to be revealed. But will it bring freedom, or will it destroy everything they've ever known? If you're intrigued by the mystery and want to uncover what happens next, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. You won't want to miss the secrets that await. Stay with us until the end and let the truth unfold together. Chapter 1. The Disappearing Heirloom. The evening in London had descended with a quiet grace, the soft murmur of distant traffic barely cutting through the gentle rhythm of the rain that fell against the window panes of 221B Baker Street. The street lamps outside cast long, trembling shadows, their faint glow mixing with the thickening fog. In the warmth of the sitting room, Sherlock Holmes sat by the fire, his tall figure a silhouette against the flickering flames. He was lost in his thoughts, swirling a small glass of brandy in his hand, eyes fixed on the embers as they burned low. Dr. John Watson, his ever-loyal companion, sat across from him, buried in a medical journal. His face, as always, was earnest, though his mind seemed to drift toward the quiet moments they had shared before the weight of the world's mysteries returned to them. There was an eerie stillness in the room that for a brief moment seemed to promise an evening without interruption. But Holmes, as always, was attuned to the slightest sound. "Do you hear that?" Watson asked suddenly, looking up from his journal. Holmes did not answer immediately. His sharp eyes, darker now with the shadows of the room, seemed to pierce the quiet around them, listening for something beneath the stillness. A soft knock at the door, barely audible over the crackle of the fire. It was the type of knock that promised something more than a mere visitor, something that carried with it an unspoken urgency. Holmes set his glass down, rising with a fluid grace. He was never one to let the comfort of a quiet evening deter him from the calls of the unknown. As he crossed the room, he motioned for Watson to follow him, his eyes glinting with a quiet intensity that indicated the arrival of a new puzzle. The door creaked open slowly, revealing a figure that seemed almost as if it had stepped out of the mist itself. A woman, pale as moonlight, her eyes wide with distress. She was dressed in mourning clothes, a deep black veil covering her face, though her sorrow was evident even without a glimpse of her expression. The woman began, her voice fragile and trembling. "Mr. Sherlock Holmes, I need your help." Holmes's gaze softened, recognizing the weight of her distress, yet his eyes were calculating, ever alert to the mystery that stirred beneath the surface. "Please, come in," he said in his usual calm, measured tone. He gestured toward the seating area, and the woman stepped in, her movements quick but uncertain, as if afraid of the shadows in the corners of the room. Once seated, the woman took a moment, collecting herself, though the tension in her posture was unmistakable. "My name is Lady Evelyn Larkspur," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "And I have come to you with a matter of great urgency, Mr. Holmes." Holmes raised an eyebrow, his interest piqued. He studied her closely. Her pallor, the tightness in her shoulders, the way she kept glancing toward the door as if fearing it would close and trap her in a world of secrets. "What troubles you, Lady Larkspur?" Watson asked, leaning forward, his voice filled with genuine concern. It is my family's heirloom," she continued, her voice quivering. "The crimson key. It has gone missing, and I fear it has been stolen." The words hung in the air, heavy with significance, yet they were barely the beginning of the tale she was about to unfold. Holmes's eyes flickered with a sharp gleam as he listened, but his expression remained steady. "The crimson key," Holmes repeated softly, testing the words. "What is so important about this key, Lady Larkspur?" Her eyes shone with a mixture of sorrow and fear, and she seemed to hesitate before answering. "It is a relic, Mr. Holmes, passed down through generations of my family. A key, you see, that is said to unlock a hidden chamber within our estate, an ancient chamber that holds treasures. But more than that, it holds something far darker, something that my family has guarded for centuries." Holmes's lips barely twitched as he processed her words. A key that opens a hidden chamber. How fascinating. And yet, it is missing? "Yes," she whispered, her voice trembling with the weight of the revelation. "It was kept locked in a chest within my study. Only my late husband, Lord Larkspur, knew the exact location of it. But when I opened the chest this morning, I found it empty. The key is gone, Mr. Holmes." A silence fell over the room. Even the fire seemed to crackle quieter as Holmes's sharp mind began to piece together the puzzle. A key that held the power to unlock not just a room, but the very secrets of a family's past. Secrets that had been carefully hidden for generations. And now, it had disappeared. Holmes leaned back, his fingers steepled in thought, his eyes narrowed. "A theft, you say? But there is more to this story than meets the eye, I suspect. The crimson key is not merely a trinket of sentimental value. It is the key to something far greater, something far more dangerous. The question, Lady Larkspur, is why now? Why has it been taken at this moment?" She looked down at her hands, wringing them in her lap. "I do not know, Mr. Holmes, but I fear that whoever has it may not have the best of intentions." Holmes's voice was soft, but it carried a note of certainty. "I believe this is no simple theft. The crimson key represents more than just wealth. It represents power. And power, Lady Larkspur, can corrupt even the most virtuous of souls." As he spoke, the atmosphere in the room grew thicker, heavier, as if the walls themselves were closing in with the weight of a long-forgotten secret. Holmes's mind was already racing, the pieces of the puzzle slipping into place. And yet the question remained. Who had taken the key? And what did they intend to do with it? Lady Larkspur stood, her face pale but determined. "Mr. Holmes, I beg of you, help me recover it. I cannot bear the thought of what might happen if it falls into the wrong hands." Holmes's gaze shifted to Watson, his eyes sharp with resolve. "We shall leave at once, Watson. There is no time to waste." The storm outside raged on, but within the walls of 221B, the mystery of the Crimson Key had begun to unravel, and in its wake, a dark and dangerous truth beckoned, just out of reach, like a shadow waiting to be revealed. Chapter 2. The mystery deepens. The following morning, a thick fog hung over the streets of London, casting an eerie stillness upon the city. The rain, though lighter than the night before, still misted the cobblestones, adding an element of mystery to the streets as Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson made their way to the Larkspur estate. Their carriage rolled through the mist-covered roads, the horses' hooves barely audible as they cut through the damp fog. It was as if the very air around them held its breath, waiting for something to break the silence. Holmes sat across from Watson, his sharp eyes fixed on the passing scenery, his mind already unraveling the clues that had been presented to him. Watson glanced at his companion, sensing the intensity in Holmes's quiet demeanor. He could feel that something crucial was hidden beneath the surface of the case, something that only Holmes could see. But what was it? There was something about Lady Larkspur's story that didn't sit right with him, something more than just the missing key. "Holmes," Watson began, his voice low. "What do you make of it all? The key, the hidden chamber, Lady Larkspur's family history." Holmes leaned back in his seat, his fingers steepled in thought. "The Crimson Key, Watson, is more than just an heirloom. It represents a secret long kept from the world, a secret buried so deep that even the Larkspurs are afraid to unearth it. But someone, it seems, is determined to do just that." "You think Lady Larkspur is hiding something?" Watson asked, though he was reluctant to voice the suspicion. The lady's distress had seemed genuine after all. Holmes's lips curled into a thin smile. "Not necessarily, but I suspect there is far more at play here than mere theft. Whoever took the key is not interested in just the treasure it opens. No, Watson, they want something else, something far darker." The carriage slowed as it reached the imposing gates of the Larkspur estate. The estate was an ancient manor, nestled in the heart of the countryside, standing tall against the mist as if defying the fog to reach it. The estate's weathered stone walls were wrapped in ivy, and the windows seemed like eyes watching the world with a knowing gaze. It was a house of secrets, and Holmes could feel the weight of its history pressing down on them as they approached. As they were ushered inside, Lady Larkspur greeted them with a mixture of relief and dread, her delicate hands clasped tightly in front of her. She led them through the grand hall, past portraits of grim ancestors, whose eyes seemed to follow their every move. Holmes's keen eyes scanned the surroundings, noting every detail, every creak of the floorboards, every flicker of movement in the shadows. He could sense that something was amiss within these walls, but it was not the warmth of the grand manor that made him uneasy. It was the secrets it kept hidden beneath its facade. They arrived at the study, where the Crimson Key had been kept. The room was dimly lit, with dark wooden furniture and shelves lined with dusty books. The study seemed untouched by time, yet there was an underlying tension in the air, as if the room itself knew the importance of the missing key. Lady Larkspur gestured to the chest that had once held the key. "This is where it was kept," she said, her voice barely more than a whisper. Holmes approached the chest with deliberate steps, examining it closely. It was a beautiful piece of craftsmanship, made of dark mahogany, with intricate carvings that seemed to dance in the flickering light. Yet, despite its beauty, there was something about it that gave Holmes a sense of unease, like it had witnessed too many secrets over the years. "Tell me, Lady Larkspur," Holmes began, his voice calm but measured. "Who else in the household knew about the key's location?" Lady Larkspur hesitated for a moment, her gaze flicking toward the door as if ensuring no one was eavesdropping. "Only my late husband, Lord Larkspur," she replied softly. "He was the only one who knew the exact location of the key, but there were whispers of a rival family, the Ravenscrofts. My husband often spoke of them in hushed tones, as if they were a threat. I do not know the full story, Mr. Holmes, but I fear they may have had something to do with it." Holmes paused, his gaze sharpening as he turned toward her. Ravenscrofts? A rival family, you say? Tell me more. Lady Larkspur's voice trembled as she continued. Lord Ravenscroft was once a close friend of my father's, but something changed between them. I know not the details, but I suspect it had to do with this very key. My husband always warned me to never trust the Ravenscrofts. He believed they were after the key, Mr. Holmes. But after his death, I thought the threat was no longer there. Holmes's eyes flicked toward Watson, then back to Lady Larkspur. It seems, Lady Larkspur, that your husband may have known more than you realize. And now, the Ravenscrofts, whoever they may be, appear to have rekindled an interest in your family's secrets. He moved closer to the chest, his fingers grazing the intricate carvings on its surface. His mind was already piecing together the puzzle. The missing key, the ominous warnings, the long-standing rivalry. But there was something more. The room felt colder now, the air thicker, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath, waiting for the next move. Lady Larkspur, Holmes said, turning to her once more. Are you certain that no one else knew of the key's location? No servants? No one in your household who might have overheard a conversation? She shook her head, but Holmes could see the flicker of doubt in her eyes. I am sure, Mr. Holmes, no one except my husband. Holmes's gaze softened for a moment. Then he turned to Watson. Come, Watson, let us see what more this house can tell us. As they stepped away from the chest, Holmes's mind was already racing. There was something about Lady Larkspur's story that felt incomplete, something she wasn't telling them. The Ravenscrofts were surely a part of the puzzle, but were they the only ones with a motive to take the key? And if so, why now? But the real question that lingered in Holmes's mind was this. What exactly did the Crimson Key unlock? And why had it been hidden for so long? As they left the study, the weight of the mystery pressed down on them, thick and suffocating. The house was full of shadows, shadows that seemed to whisper secrets, shadows that would not let them rest until the truth was revealed. Chapter 3. The Ravenscroft Connection. The day had barely begun when Holmes and Watson set out for the Ravenscroft estate. The skies above were still shrouded in thick, brooding clouds, casting a gray pallor over the landscape. The heavy air, damp from the morning rain, seemed to carry the weight of secrets long buried. As their carriage bumped along the uneven road, Holmes remained silent, his mind clearly at work, as it often was when faced with the complexities of a case. Watson sat across from him, his thoughts wandering. The Ravenscrofts. What connection did they have to the missing Crimson Key? And why had Lady Larkspur mentioned them in such an ominous light? Something about the whole situation troubled Watson. He had known Holmes long enough to sense when there was more to a story than met the eye. And there was no doubt in his mind. The Ravenscrofts were somehow entwined in this mystery. The question was, how? The carriage rattled on for what seemed like hours, though in truth, it was only a short distance out of London. As they approached the Ravenscroft estate, the very atmosphere seemed to change. The house stood before them like a dark, imposing fortress, its silhouette stark against the brooding sky. The estate was enormous. Its stone walls were crumbling in places, and the towering iron gates, which were adorned with ornate symbols, seemed to guard the house as fiercely as any sentry. Holmes's eyes glinted with interest as the carriage pulled up to the front door. His sharp gaze took in every detail, every sign of neglect that might suggest hidden layers to the story they were about to uncover. The Ravenscrofts, Holmes had learned, were a family with a legacy as old and mysterious as the manor they inhabited. The door creaked open, revealing a tall, severe-looking man standing in the shadowed entrance. His face was pale, almost ghostly, with sharp features and a calculating gaze. This was Edward Ravenscroft, the head of the family. There was an air of formality about him, though his manner was not welcoming. "Mr. Holmes," Ravenscroft greeted them, his voice cold, but not without a certain underlying tension. "I had expected you." Holmes did not extend his hand, but instead he studied Ravenscroft with a look that seemed to peel away the man's every layer. "Mr. Ravenscroft," Holmes replied, his voice calm but penetrating. "We are here to discuss the recent events surrounding the missing Crimson Key. I understand your family has an interest in it." Ravenscroft stiffened, but his eyes never wavered. "I do not know what you are implying, Mr. Holmes. My family has no involvement in the theft of any heirloom." Holmes's gaze remained unwavering. "I am not implying, Mr. Ravenscroft. I am asking. You see, the Larkspur family has long been associated with yours through a history of rivalry. The Crimson Key has ties to both your family's past and theirs, and now it is missing." For a brief moment, Ravenscroft's expression faltered. His eyes, once calculating, now seemed to shimmer with something darker. Perhaps fear, or perhaps anger. "I know nothing of what you speak," he said, his voice barely concealing the sharp edge beneath. Holmes, ever the master of reading subtle cues, stepped closer, his presence like a shadow in the doorway. "You see, Mr. Ravenscroft, I do not believe in coincidences. The Larkspur's key has been missing for less than a day, and yet I find it curious that you are so certain of your family's innocence. Could it be that your family's interest in the key is more pressing than you let on?" Ravenscroft's eyes narrowed. "You think we are involved in this theft? You accuse my family of—" "I accuse no one, Mr. Ravenscroft," Holmes interrupted smoothly. "I only seek the truth. You claim no interest in the key, yet I find it difficult to believe that the history between your two families is merely a casual one. What is the real story, Mr. Ravenscroft? Why do I sense that you are hiding something from me?" A moment of heavy silence passed between them. The tension in the air was palpable, and Watson could sense that they were nearing the heart of something important. But just as the silence began to settle, Edward Ravenscroft's expression shifted. His gaze became steely, his jaw tightening in resolve. "Very well, Mr. Holmes," Ravenscroft said, his voice low but laced with a strange finality. "If you insist on digging into matters that should remain buried, I will not stand in your way. But be warned, some secrets are better left untouched." Holmes's eyes flashed with understanding. "Ah, now we are getting to the heart of the matter." Without another word, Ravenscroft stepped back and gestured for them to enter. The hallway they walked through was dim, the air thick with dust and the scent of old wood. Portraits of grim-faced ancestors hung along the walls, their eyes seemingly following Holmes and Watson as they passed. The house felt cold, not from the absence of warmth, but from the weight of its history, a history that Holmes was determined to unravel. Ravenscroft led them to a study at the back of the house. The room was dark, with heavy curtains drawn to block out the little light that tried to pierce the gloom. It was a room designed for business, but there was an unsettling stillness to it, as though the walls themselves were waiting for something to break the silence. Once inside, Ravenscroft moved to a large desk, cluttered with papers and odd artifacts. He picked up a letter with an air of finality and handed it to Holmes. "This is a letter from my late father," he said, his voice cool. "It mentions the Crimson Key. He believed the key was a map to something far more valuable than a mere family heirloom. My father warned me that the Larkspur family's claim to the key was tied to something much darker. But that is a matter for another time. Mr. Holmes?" Holmes studied the letter for a moment, his eyes scanning the elegant script that seemed to hold more weight than its words suggested. "Your father feared something then?" Holmes remarked. "He thought the key was tied to more than treasure." Ravenscroft's gaze flickered with something like regret, but it was gone as quickly as it had appeared. "My father believed that the key unlocked not just a room, but a door to something far worse, something best left forgotten. It said that the Larkspurs knew the key's true purpose, and that they hid it to keep its power locked away." Holmes nodded slowly, absorbing the information. "And now, someone has stolen it. This theft, Mr. Ravenscroft, is only the beginning. Whoever has taken the key has a far greater purpose in mind. The question remains, what is that purpose?" Ravenscroft looked down at the desk, his expression unreadable. "I can only guess, but I fear it is something no one should meddle with." Holmes turned to Watson, his mind already working. "It seems, Watson, we are dealing with more than just a missing heirloom. We are dealing with a secret far older and more dangerous than we ever imagined." The door to the study creaked open, and Holmes and Watson stepped back into the hallway. The air was thick with the sense of unfinished business, as though the house itself was holding its breath, waiting for the next revelation. As they walked back through the gloomy corridors of Ravenscroft Manor, Holmes's sharp mind continued to churn. The truth was closer than ever, yet still out of reach. The missing key was not just a key to a room or a treasure chest. It was a key to something buried deep within the Ravenscroft and Larkspur families' shared past. And the more Holmes uncovered, the more he realized that no one, neither the Ravenscrofts nor the Larkspurs, was entirely innocent. Chapter 4. A Hidden Clue. The following days brought an unsettling stillness to 221B Baker Street, as Sherlock Holmes became increasingly absorbed in the details of the Larkspur case. The weather, too, seemed to mirror the air of anticipation that hung over them. The rain had let up, but the sky remained perpetually overcast, and a cool breeze rustled the leaves of the trees outside their window. The entire world seemed to be holding its breath. Holmes sat, as always, with his fingers steepled in thought, the faintest hint of a smile curling at the corners of his lips, though it was not the smile of satisfaction. It was the smile of a man on the cusp of understanding something profound, something that lingered just beyond the surface, like a shadow waiting to take form. Watson, meanwhile, had been preoccupied with his own thoughts. The pieces of the puzzle seemed to be scattered in his mind, and he couldn't help but wonder if they were missing something crucial. The Ravenscrofts were clearly involved, but how? And why had Lady Larkspur spoken of the hidden chamber and the Crimson Key with such fear in her eyes? "I cannot help but feel," Watson said aloud, breaking the silence, "that we are missing something, Holmes. Some piece of this mystery that is still hidden from view." Holmes looked up, his sharp eyes glimmering with the hint of something profound. "You are correct, Watson. There is more to this case than the theft of a mere key. We must delve deeper into the Larkspur estate. There, I believe, lies the answer we seek." With that, Holmes rose from his chair, and Watson followed without question. They were once again heading to the Larkspur estate, where the shadows of the past lingered like a veil over the present. But this time, Holmes was no longer relying solely on Lady Larkspur's account. He had come to a conclusion, one that had not been shared, and yet he could not ignore the sense that something important had been overlooked in the study. The carriage ride to the estate was quiet, the streets of London now behind them, replaced by the rolling hills that surrounded Lady Larkspur's ancestral home. The air grew colder as they neared the manor, and a fog began to rise from the ground, wrapping the house in a shroud of mystery. As they stepped out of the carriage, Holmes's keen eyes scanned the surroundings. Every detail, every movement caught his attention. Lady Larkspur greeted them at the door, her face pale and weary. "Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson," she said softly. "I'm so glad you've come. But do you believe you have found something?" Holmes's response was measured, his voice calm. "We have not found what we seek yet, Lady Larkspur, but I believe we are on the right path." She led them into the study once more, her footsteps tentative, as if afraid to disturb something long hidden. Holmes took in the room with a practiced eye. The heavy wooden desk, the shelves laden with dusty books, the faintest creak of the floorboards underfoot. All of it was familiar, yet it felt different now, as if something had changed in the air, something imperceptible, yet powerful. Watson watched Holmes closely, noticing the subtle shift in his demeanor. Holmes was no longer simply searching for clues. He was hunting for the answer. Lady Larkspur hesitated before speaking, her voice laced with uncertainty. "I fear I have not been entirely truthful with you, Mr. Holmes. There is more to my family's history, more than I dared share with you before." Holmes's gaze was sharp, but his tone remained gentle. "You were not fully forthcoming, Lady Larkspur, but I understand. The weight of secrets is heavy, and sometimes the truth is too painful to speak. But we must uncover it if we are to move forward." She nodded, her eyes distant. "The key. It is not merely a symbol of wealth or power. It holds the key to a truth that my family has long wished to bury. It was meant to remain hidden, for if it were discovered, everything would be destroyed." Holmes's eyes glinted as he turned toward the chest, the one where the crimson key had been hidden. His fingers brushed the carved surface again, this time with more focus, more intention. As he moved his hand, something caught his eye, a faint scratch on the wood. It was nearly imperceptible, but it was there, just beside the lock, as though someone had forced it open in haste. "Watson, look here," Holmes murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. Watson leaned in, his eyes narrowing. "It's a scratch, but it doesn't look like it's from the lock. It's almost as if something, or someone, has tried to move the chest." Holmes nodded, a spark of understanding lighting his eyes. "Exactly. Someone moved the chest in haste, but why? Why would they leave such an obvious trace? It's almost as if they knew the key was already gone." Lady Larkspur stepped forward, her face tense with fear. "What does that mean, Mr. Holmes? Has someone been in the study?" Holmes turned to face her, his expression unreadable. Someone was in the study long before we arrived, Lady Larkspur, and they left this mark behind. The key was never stolen that night. It was taken before, and whoever took it was not interested in hiding the evidence. This means they were never concerned with keeping their actions a secret. In fact, I believe this was all part of their plan. Watson looked between them, feeling the weight of the realization settle in his chest. So, the key was never really lost. It was stolen long ago, hidden away, and then returned to draw us in. Holmes's voice was low but filled with certainty. Yes, Watson, this entire charade was orchestrated. Whoever took the key wanted us to follow the trail. They knew we would uncover the truth eventually. But the question remains, what are they trying to hide? The room grew even colder, and Watson felt the hairs on the back of his neck prickle. The mystery was not just about a missing heirloom anymore. It was about something far more dangerous. A hidden truth that someone was willing to kill to protect. Holmes turned back to the chest, his mind racing as he examined it further. He could see that the marks on the wood were not random. They had been carefully placed, as if to mislead. He pressed his fingers into the crack of the chest, gently prying it open. Inside, there was nothing but a faded piece of parchment, carefully folded. Holmes unfolded it with a careful hand, revealing writing that was both delicate and faint, as if it had been meant to be concealed from time itself. The words were written in an old, ornate hand. The truth lies buried beneath the heart of the Larkspur estate. The key unlocks more than just a room. It unlocks a legacy that should remain forgotten. Holmes read the words aloud, the weight of their meaning settling over them all. Watson felt his heart quicken. What does it mean? A legacy buried beneath the estate? Holmes's eyes gleamed with the promise of discovery. It means, Watson, that our search has only just begun. The Crimson Key was never meant to open a simple chamber. It was meant to reveal a legacy that someone would do anything to keep hidden. As they stood in the dim light of the study, the mystery deepened, darker and more tangled than ever before. The hidden clue had revealed something far more troubling than they could have anticipated. Someone was playing a dangerous game, and the stakes were higher than ever. The question now was not only who had taken the key, but who was willing to kill to keep the truth buried. The shadows of the estate stretched long across the walls as Holmes, Watson, and Lady Larkspur were left to contemplate the meaning of the clue. The game was far from over, and with each passing moment, the tension in the room grew thicker. The mystery was no longer just about the key. It was about something far more powerful, something that threatened to unravel everything. Chapter 5. The Hidden Chamber. The rain, which had been a constant companion in London for the past few days, finally began to subside. A fragile peace seemed to settle over the city, but the atmosphere in 221B Baker Street was anything but calm. Sherlock Holmes sat by the fire, his face illuminated by the soft, flickering glow of the flames. His fingers, as usual, were steepled in front of him, a gesture that signaled the deep concentration with which he studied the threads of the case. Dr. Watson, sitting across from him, watched the detective with a sense of unease. The pieces of the puzzle were becoming clearer, but with each new discovery, the mystery seemed to grow more complex. They had uncovered the first clue, the cryptic message hidden inside the chest, but now they were left with more questions than answers. What legacy was being hidden beneath the Larkspur estate? And why had someone gone to such lengths to conceal it? Holmes's piercing gaze flickered briefly to Watson, then back to the fire. "I believe it is time we took our search to the heart of the Larkspur estate, Watson," he said in his usual low, calm tone. "We've followed the trail of clues so far, but I have a feeling that the answer we seek lies buried in the very foundations of that house. It is not just a key we are searching for. It is the truth." Watson nodded, though a sense of apprehension gnawed at him. The more they uncovered, the more it seemed that the Larkspur estate itself was holding something back, something so deeply concealed that it could unravel everything. But there was no turning back now. They had come too far to stop. The journey to the Larkspur estate was brief, though the weight of their mission made the ride feel longer than it truly was. As the carriage approached the mansion, the air grew heavier. With an unsettling silence, the estate stood before them, imposing and full of secrets. The ivy-clad walls, the creaking windows, the looming shadows, all seemed to suggest that something ancient and forgotten was buried within its very stones. Lady Larkspur met them at the door, her face drawn with worry, but there was a hint of resolve in her eyes that hadn't been there before. She had once seemed like a woman caught in the grip of fear, but now there was something different about her, something hardened, as if she, too, were beginning to see the truth. "Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson," she greeted them, her voice steady. "I fear the time for explanations has come. I owe you the full truth." Holmes gave a small nod. "You have already shown us glimpses, Lady Larkspur. Now it is time to see the whole picture." With a deep breath, Lady Larkspur led them inside, her footsteps echoing softly in the hall as they made their way to the study. The room felt different now, darker somehow, as if the very air had thickened with the weight of the secrets it held. Lady Larkspur stopped in front of the chest where the crimson key had once been kept. The chest was still there, but the presence of the key was palpable in its absence. "There is something in this house," Lady Larkspur began, her voice low. "Something my family has been hiding for centuries. The key. It was never just a simple heirloom. It was meant to keep something locked away. A truth that, if revealed, would change everything." Holmes studied her with a mix of curiosity and caution. "You speak of a truth. What truth?" She hesitated before answering, her voice trembling just slightly. "My ancestors were involved in dark practices, Mr. Holmes. The key was created to protect a hidden chamber within the estate, one that no one, not even the Larkspurs, was meant to open. It is said that within that chamber lies the heart of our family's dark legacy, something far more dangerous than mere riches or power." Holmes's expression remained impassive, but Watson could see the flicker of interest in his eyes. "A hidden chamber," Holmes murmured. "How convenient, Lady Larkspur. And where exactly is this chamber?" Lady Larkspur's gaze dropped to the floor, as though ashamed to speak of it. "No one knows for sure. My ancestors took great pains to keep its existence a secret. But there are rumors that it lies beneath the foundations of this house, hidden from view, protected by a series of intricate mechanisms." Holmes turned to Watson, his eyes narrowing. "It seems, Watson, that we have reached the heart of the matter. The chamber itself is the key to understanding everything." Lady Larkspur's hands clenched in front of her, her fingers trembling. "Please, Mr. Holmes, you must understand. If this truth comes to light, it will ruin everything. My family's name, our legacy. Everything we have worked for will be destroyed." Holmes's voice softened, but there was an undeniable edge to it. "Lady Larkspur, it is not a matter of what your family has worked for. It is a matter of what has been hidden from the world. The truth must come out, for it cannot remain buried forever." Without another word, Holmes walked to the fireplace, his keen eyes scanning the room with precise calculation. He ran his fingers along the mantelpiece, his gaze darting between the walls. It was clear to Watson that Holmes was piecing together something vital that had been hidden in plain sight. "Watson," Holmes called, his voice laced with quiet certainty. "Look here, a faint marking on the wall." Watson moved forward and knelt down to examine the markings. They were subtle, barely noticeable, yet when combined with the layout of the room, they formed a pattern, a sequence that, if followed, would surely lead them to the hidden chamber. There was no doubt now. Holmes had found something that had been deliberately obscured, meant to be overlooked by anyone who wasn't looking closely enough. Holmes turned to Lady Larkspur, his eyes gleaming with purpose. "Lady Larkspur, we are about to uncover the truth. You can stay here or you can accompany us, but the choice is yours. Either way, the mystery ends tonight." A long silence hung in the air, thick with tension. Lady Larkspur seemed torn between fear and an undeniable need to face the past. She finally nodded, her expression resolute. "I will come with you." With that, Holmes and Watson moved forward, their footsteps echoing softly as they followed the markings on the wall. The hidden chamber was near. Holmes knew it as certainly as he knew his own name. But as they descended the narrow staircase that had been hidden behind a false wall, a strange sense of foreboding seemed to settle over them. The chamber door, when it was finally revealed, stood before them, solid and unyielding, yet it seemed to beckon them forward, like a door to another world, one that had been sealed away for too long. Holmes stepped forward, his hand resting on the cold brass handle. He paused for a moment, glancing back at Watson and Lady Larkspur. There was no turning back now. "Shall we?" Holmes asked, his voice low but filled with a quiet intensity. And with that, the door creaked open, revealing what lay within. Chapter 6. The Truth Unveiled. The door creaked open with a groan, the sound echoing like a whisper through the cold, empty corridors of the Larkspur estate. For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath as Sherlock Holmes, Dr. Watson, and Lady Evelyn Larkspur stood in front of the hidden chamber. The air in the room felt heavier now, as if the walls themselves knew they were about to reveal a secret long buried. Holmes's hand rested gently on the cold brass handle, the weight of the moment pressing down on him. His mind raced with the implications of what they might find behind that door. This was no ordinary hidden room. It was a legacy of his family's past, a part of Lady Larkspur's history that had been locked away to protect something, or perhaps someone. Lady Larkspur stood beside him, her face pale but determined. Her eyes flickered toward the door, as if she were seeing it for the first time. She had not wanted to come this far, but now that she had, she seemed resolute in facing the truth, no matter how devastating it might be. "Are you sure, Lady Larkspur?" Holmes asked quietly, though his voice was filled with understanding. He knew that for her, this moment carried the weight of a lifetime of secrets. Lady Larkspur nodded slowly, her voice trembling only slightly. "I have lived with this burden for so long, Mr. Holmes. It's time to know what truly lies behind this door." Holmes gave her a brief, comforting smile, then turned his attention back to the door. With a slow, deliberate motion, he turned the handle and pushed the door open. The hinges protested, creaking like a whisper of the past, but the door gave way at last. The chamber before them was dimly lit by a few flickering candles placed at irregular intervals around the stone walls. The air was damp and musty, thick with the scent of aged wood and forgotten years. It was a small room, but it exuded a strange, foreboding energy, as though time had been suspended within its walls. Holmes entered first, his gaze immediately sweeping the room with its usual sharpness. Watson and Lady Larkspur followed closely behind, their footsteps muted on the cold stone floor. Everything about the chamber seemed to speak of age and secrecy. Old books, dusty scrolls, and objects whose true meaning was obscured by time. There, in the center of the room, stood a pedestal, and upon it rested a large, ornate book. It was bound in dark leather, its edges frayed with age. The book seemed to hum with a quiet power, its presence commanding attention, though it was untouched by time, in the same way that the rest of the room had been. Holmes approached the pedestal with measured steps, as if he were approaching something sacred, something that held the answers to the mysteries that had been haunting them. His fingers hovered just above the book, but he did not touch it immediately. Instead, he took a moment to study its cover, the ancient symbols etched into the leather surface. "What is this book, Lady Larkspur?" Holmes asked softly, his voice barely more than a murmur. Lady Larkspur stepped forward, her eyes now filled with a deep sadness. "That book is the key to my family's past. It contains the history that we have hidden away. My ancestors believed that if it was ever discovered, the truth would destroy everything they worked for." Holmes's brow furrowed, and Watson could feel the tension building. "The truth, you say? What truth could possibly be so terrible?" Lady Larkspur hesitated for a long moment, her gaze flickering between the book and Holmes. "My family's wealth, our name, everything we have built. It was founded on a lie. The Larkspurs were not always noble. We came into power through dark means, through dealings with forces that should never have been touched. This book, it contains the evidence of what they did." Watson felt a cold chill run down his spine. "You mean to say your family—" "They made a pact," Lady Larkspur interrupted, her voice barely a whisper. "A pact with dark forces, with men who dabbled in the occult. My ancestors used the power they gained to amass wealth and influence, but at a terrible cost. The key, this key, was the tool used to keep the truth locked away. They sealed it in this chamber, so no one would ever discover what they had done." Holmes turned his attention back to the book, his fingers brushing lightly against its worn surface. "And you've kept this secret all these years, Lady Larkspur?" "I had no choice," she replied, her voice heavy with regret. "When I married Lord Larkspur, I believed I was marrying into a noble family, unaware of the horrors that lay in its past. When my husband passed, I thought it was finally over. But then, the key went missing, and I realized that someone was trying to uncover the truth." Holmes's sharp gaze flicked between the book and Lady Larkspur, his mind working furiously to piece the puzzle together. The crimson key, the missing heirloom. It was never about wealth. It was about something far darker, something that had been buried deep within the heart of the Larkspur estate. Holmes exhaled slowly, his voice calm, yet filled with a quiet certainty. The key was never meant to unlock a treasure. It was meant to unlock the truth. The truth about your family's rise to power and the dark price they paid for it. Watson watched Holmes closely, but the detective remained impassive, his mind already several steps ahead. He knew that this book, this forgotten relic, held the answers they sought. And yet, there was something else. The ominous feeling that whatever the truth was, it would come at a great cost. Without a word, Holmes opened the book, the yellowed pages creaking softly as they parted. He scanned the ancient text, his eyes moving quickly over the words, but there was a heavy silence in the room, as though even the air itself was waiting for the revelation to come. Then Holmes's hand froze, his gaze fixed on a single passage, a line that stood out among the rest. "The Larkspur family pact is sealed in blood," Holmes murmured softly, almost to himself, "and only the bloodline can break it." Lady Larkspur's face went pale as she stepped closer, her eyes darting to the page. "What does it mean? What does that mean, Mr. Holmes?" Holmes's voice was low, measured. "It means that your family's legacy is tied to something far darker than mere wealth. It is bound by a pact that only the bloodline can break." Watson felt a cold, heavy weight settle over him. The truth they had uncovered was not just a story of old wealth. It was a tale of darkness, of power gained at an unimaginable cost. Holmes closed the book slowly, his expression grim. The key was never just a key to a room. It was a key to a history that your family tried to bury. And now, that history is coming to light. Lady Larkspur stepped back, her hand trembling as she clutched her chest. No, it can't be true. I never wanted any of this. I never wanted to know what my ancestors had done. Holmes turned to her, his gaze softening for a moment. "The truth, Lady Larkspur, is often more dangerous than we expect, but it is the only way forward." As the weight of the truth settled around them, the chamber seemed to grow colder, its walls heavy with the burden of secrets that had been locked away for far too long. The mystery of the Crimson Key had been unveiled, but with it came a new set of questions that would haunt them all in the days to come. Holmes turned toward Watson, his expression thoughtful. "The game is no longer about the key. It is about what lies beneath it. And I fear that what we have uncovered is only the beginning." Chapter 7. The Final Decision. The quiet weight of the chamber pressed upon them, its walls thick with secrets, its air heavy with the residue of ages past. Sherlock Holmes, Dr. Watson, and Lady Evelyn Larkspur stood in silence, the truth they had unearthed like a dark cloud hanging over them. The book, the key to the dark legacy of the Larkspur family, was closed now, its pages still faintly quivering from the revelation they had just witnessed. Holmes, who had been unwavering in his pursuit of the truth, now found himself caught in the gravity of what that truth meant. Lady Larkspur, her face pale and tear-streaked, stepped back from the pedestal. Her hands trembled, but there was something about her now, a quiet strength, a sense of acceptance that had not been there before. The weight of the family secret, once a burden too heavy to bear, seemed to shift within her. She was no longer just the terrified woman seeking Holmes's help. She was someone who had glimpsed the full extent of her family's past and was now faced with a decision that would change everything. Holmes, ever the calm observer, stood before her, his gaze steady but softened with a rare understanding. His mind, as always, worked relentlessly, processing the new revelations with practiced precision. But even he couldn't ignore the gravity of the situation. The truth they had uncovered was not simply a tale of dark ancestry. It was a trap, a legacy that had ensnared the Larkspur family for generations. And now, that trap had extended its claws into their lives. "Lady Larkspur," Holmes said, his voice gentle but firm, "you are now faced with a choice. What do you intend to do with this knowledge? This history cannot be allowed to remain buried any longer, but how will you proceed with what you now know?" Lady Larkspur's gaze wavered as she stared at the book, her thoughts far away. "I never wanted to know the truth," she whispered, her voice filled with regret. "I never asked to be part of this darkness. But now that I see it, what can I do? Can I ever escape what my ancestors did?" Holmes's expression softened even further. "It is not about escaping, Lady Larkspur. It is about confronting what has been hidden and deciding whether it will control you, or whether you will take control of it." The weight of his words lingered in the air, the silence stretching between them like a deep chasm. Watson, ever the loyal companion, watched Lady Larkspur closely, sensing her internal struggle. He had seen this before, the quiet storm that raged in a person's soul when faced with an impossible choice. But this was no ordinary dilemma. This was a decision that could alter the very fabric of a family's history, a family that had lived in the shadow of its own dark legacy for centuries. "Holmes," Watson said softly, breaking the silence. "Do you think Lady Larkspur should go public with what we've uncovered? Should we expose her family's history, no matter the cost?" Holmes turned to Watson, his sharp gaze thoughtful. "The truth is a weapon, Watson," he replied, his voice calm but carrying an edge of caution. "And like any weapon, it can be used to protect or destroy. The question is whether it is worth the destruction it might bring. Is the world ready to hear the full extent of the Larkspur family's past?" Lady Larkspur closed her eyes, her face contorting with a deep sorrow. "But what if it destroys everything? My family's name, the reputation we've worked so hard to rebuild, the people who have relied on us, trusted us. If we bring this to light, the world will see us for what we truly are. And I'm afraid of what will happen." Holmes's voice softened, a rare note of compassion threading through his words. "The cost of keeping the truth hidden, Lady Larkspur, is that it festers beneath the surface. It is the secret that controls your every move, your every decision. You may fear the consequences of exposing it, but in time, the fear of what you are hiding will consume you." The chamber seemed to grow colder, as if the air itself understood the depth of the choice before them. The walls, heavy with the knowledge of centuries, held their breath, waiting for Lady Larkspur's decision. Watson stepped forward, his voice calm and reassuring. "Perhaps there is another way, Lady Larkspur. We do not have to expose everything all at once. There may be a way to atone for the past, to use what we've uncovered for good." Holmes turned to Watson, his eyes flicking with a spark of curiosity. "Atonement," he repeated softly. "Perhaps you are right, Watson. Perhaps there is a way to use the truth to bring about something positive. But that, too, requires great courage." Lady Larkspur lifted her eyes, meeting Holmes's gaze. There was a flicker of determination in her expression now, a quiet fire that had not been there before. "I cannot change what has happened," she said, her voice steadying. "But I can choose what happens next. I can't live in the shadows of my family's past any longer. If I must face it, then I will. But I will do so on my terms." Holmes nodded, his expression approving. "You have made your choice, Lady Larkspur. It is not an easy one, but it is yours to make. And that is the most important thing." For a long moment, there was only silence in the chamber as the weight of the decision hung in the air. Then Lady Larkspur reached down, her fingers brushing the cover of the book one last time. It was as if she were sealing her fate, her family's fate, and her own. "Let it be known then," she said, her voice quiet but resolute, "that the Larkspur family will no longer hide behind its secrets. We will face the truth, no matter the cost." Holmes smiled, a small but knowing smile. Then the first step toward freedom has been taken. The chamber felt different now, as though the air had cleared with Lady Larkspur's declaration. The burden of secrecy that had once weighed so heavily on her seemed to lift, if only slightly. And though the future remained uncertain, one thing was clear. The past could no longer dictate the present. Holmes turned to Watson, his expression thoughtful. "We have done what we set out to do, Watson. The truth has been uncovered, and now the consequences must unfold. But there is one more thing to consider." Watson raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "What do you mean, Holmes?" Holmes's lips curled into a faint smile. "There are always consequences, Watson. The world does not easily accept the truth. But for Lady Larkspur, there is hope yet. With her decision, she has taken control of her destiny." As they left the chamber, the air seemed lighter, the weight of the mystery lifting from their shoulders. But even as they stepped into the quiet halls of the Larkspur estate, the echoes of what had transpired lingered in the corners of the room. The decision had been made, and with it, a new chapter in the Larkspur family's history had begun. But the journey was far from over, for the truth, once unveiled, would never be easily forgotten. Chapter 8. The Ravenscroft Conspiracy. The days following Lady Evelyn Larkspur's momentous decision felt oddly suspended in time. The heavy, oppressive air of the Larkspur estate had cleared, but a lingering tension remained. While the truth was now known to those who had uncovered it, the outside world, still unaware of the dark legacy, felt as though it might erupt at any moment. For all Lady Larkspur's courage in confronting her family's past, the road ahead remained fraught with peril. Sherlock Holmes had always been a man of logic, of precision and clarity, but even he couldn't ignore the underlying unease that seemed to swirl in the air. He sat in his chair by the fire, the flickering light casting long shadows on the walls of 221B Baker Street. The world outside was once again veiled in mist, but inside, Holmes's mind was fully awake, piecing together the remaining fragments of the puzzle. Dr. Watson, ever the steady presence, sat across from him, his hands folded over the pages of his medical journal. Yet, like Holmes, his thoughts were far from the usual subjects of anatomy and medicine. Instead, they were focused on the mystery that had consumed them, the Larkspur family's hidden history and its unexpected connection to the Ravenscrofts. "It's strange, Holmes," Watson said, breaking the silence. "Now that the truth has come to light, I cannot shake the feeling that this is not over. We have uncovered Lady Larkspur's family's secrets, but there is something more to this, something about the Ravenscrofts." Holmes's eyes flickered with the faintest glimmer of agreement. "Indeed, Watson, I have been mulling over that very thought. The Ravenscrofts are, as I have suspected, not mere bystanders in this mystery. Their involvement runs deeper than just a rivalry with the Larkspurs. It seems they have been tangled in this web of secrets for far longer than anyone realizes. Watson frowned, his thoughts aligning with Holmes's suspicions. You think the Ravenscrofts were involved in more than just stealing the Crimson Key? Holmes nodded slowly, his fingers tapping rhythmically on his chair's armrest. The Ravenscrofts have a long and complicated history with the Larkspurs, rivalries, agreements, and perhaps even darker dealings. The key was never just a symbol of power, it was a symbol of control, of a past that neither family wanted to see brought to light. But now, Lady Larkspur has made her decision. She's chosen to face the truth, and I fear that the Ravenscrofts may not take kindly to it. There was a pause in the room, as if the very weight of Holmes's words had settled over both men. The Ravenscrofts, though seemingly distant from the Larkspur estate's dark legacy, were more involved than anyone could have anticipated. Holmes had been quick to notice the subtle clues, a rivalry that had festered for years, a connection to occult practices, and now the mysterious interest they had shown in the Crimson Key. "They are playing a dangerous game, Holmes," Watson said, his voice low, as though pondering the consequences. "But why go to such lengths to protect this secret? What could they possibly gain?" Holmes's gaze became distant, focused on something only he could see. The Ravenscrofts, Watson, are not merely motivated by power or wealth. There is something deeper, more insidious at play. They are tied to something far darker than we first imagined. The key, the truth, it is not just about family legacy. It is about control, and someone wants that control. That evening, Holmes and Watson made their way back to the Ravenscroft estate, a place that now felt both familiar and foreboding. The mansion loomed in the distance, its silhouette dark against the gray skies, as though it were a watchful sentinel guarding its secrets. This time, they were not merely visiting to inquire about the missing key. No, this time, they were seeking answers about a conspiracy, one that might tie the Ravenscrofts not just to the theft, but to a far deeper and more dangerous game. Ravenscroft himself greeted them at the door, though his eyes now seemed more calculating than they had been before. His earlier stiff formality had been replaced by something sharper, as though he were preparing for a confrontation he knew was coming. "Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson," Ravenscroft said, his voice colder than before. "I trust you are here for more than just a polite visit this time." Holmes's sharp eyes never left him. "Indeed, Mr. Ravenscroft, we are here to discuss the matter of the Larkspur family's past, and your family's role in it." Ravenscroft's jaw tightened, but he did not flinch. "My family has no involvement in the Larkspur estate's secrets, Holmes. I told you before, and I will tell you again, this is not a matter for your investigation." Holmes's lips curved into a faint, knowing smile. "I think you underestimate the nature of this investigation, Mr. Ravenscroft. The Larkspur family's history is not just a matter of private concern. It is a matter of public interest now. And I have reason to believe your family has been entangled in this web of secrets for far longer than you are willing to admit." For a moment, there was silence between them. Ravenscroft's face betrayed little emotion, but his eyes flickered with something that Holmes had learned to read as the subtle sign of a man concealing the truth. "I don't know what you think you've uncovered," Ravenscroft said, his voice low and steady. "But if you continue down this path, You may not like what you find." Holmes's gaze intensified. "The truth is a delicate thing, Mr. Ravenscroft, but it is one that cannot be ignored. You have been hiding something that connects your family to the Larkspurs, and I intend to uncover it." Ravenscroft's eyes darkened, and for the briefest moment, Holmes saw a flicker of something almost like fear, though it was quickly masked by a veneer of coldness. "You're making a grave mistake, Holmes," he said, his voice laced with warning. But Holmes was undeterred. He had already begun to piece the puzzle together. The Ravenscrofts were far more involved than they had initially let on. There was a connection between them and the Larkspurs that went beyond rivalry, and it was this connection that Holmes intended to expose. Holmes and Watson spent the following hours combing through the Ravenscroft estate. They carefully examined every document they could find, each one revealing more about the Ravenscrofts' history with the Larkspurs. As Holmes had suspected, the two families had not just been rivals. They had been entangled in a secret war for control over something far more dangerous than power. The hidden chambers, the occult practices, the secret pacts. It was all connected, and the truth, once again, had a price. Holmes knew that revealing this connection could bring down both families, and the consequences of that were still unclear. As they left the Ravenscroft estate, the fog seemed to close in around them, thick and suffocating. Holmes and Watson walked in silence, the weight of the discovery pressing down on them. "The Ravenscrofts," Watson finally spoke, breaking the silence. "They are more involved than we thought." Holmes's voice was calm, but filled with the resolve of a man who had seen the truth unfold before him. "Yes, Watson, and now we must decide what to do with that truth. For if we expose it, we risk everything. But if we let it remain hidden, we allow the cycle to continue." Watson glanced at his friend, the flickering light of the gas lamps casting shadows over Holmes's face. "And what will we do, Holmes?" Holmes's voice softened. "We will proceed carefully, Watson. We will uncover the truth, but only when the time is right. For now, we wait. But the Ravenscrofts will not remain silent for long, and when they move, we must be ready." Chapter 9. A Peaceful Resolution. The fog that had rolled in like a thick blanket over the city of London began to lift, giving way to the soft glow of twilight as Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson returned to 221B Baker Street after a long and trying day. The quiet streets, shrouded in a gentle mist, seemed to mirror the stillness that had descended over Holmes's mind. The revelations of the past week had not been easy to digest, and the path they had chosen to walk had not been without its dangers. But the resolution, the decision made, was now clear. Lady Evelyn Larkspur had faced the truth, and with her courage came the weight of a decision that could change everything. The Ravenscrofts, despite their attempts to bury their involvement, had been drawn into the open, their dark legacy exposed. Yet, for all the mystery they had unraveled, the case had reached its climax in a way Holmes had not anticipated. The truth had not broken the Larkspur family, as he feared. Instead, it had freed them. The darkness of the past, long buried, had finally been brought to light. As Holmes sat in his chair by the fire, his fingers steepled in contemplation, Watson couldn't help but notice the subtle change in his friend. The sharpness, the ever-present energy that characterized Holmes had softened. There was a sense of quiet satisfaction now, though the weight of what they had uncovered still lingered in the air. "I must admit, Holmes," Watson said, breaking the silence as he set his journal aside. "I never expected things to turn out the way they have. We've uncovered so much darkness in the Larkspur family, but in the end, Lady Larkspur's decision to confront it seems to have brought some peace." Holmes's eyes flickered up, the soft glow of the fire reflecting in his gaze. "Indeed, Watson, but peace, though a welcome respite, is often fragile. The truth, once revealed, has a way of rippling through everything, altering the course of lives in ways we cannot always predict." The quiet flicker of the fire was the only sound in the room for a moment, as Holmes's words hung in the air, settling into the corners of the room. Watson, ever the more practical of the two, leaned back in his chair, his thoughts slowly turning over the events that had transpired. "Do you think the Ravenscrofts will act, now that their role in all this is exposed?" Watson asked, his voice tinged with a hint of concern. "Surely they cannot let the Larkspurs move on so easily." Holmes smiled faintly, his expression softening as he considered Watson's question. "The Ravenscrofts may be powerful, Watson, but power is not absolute. The truth, once brought to light, tends to weaken the hold that secrecy has on a family, no matter how far-reaching their influence may be. They may strike out in their desperation, but their power is no longer the same. The Larkspurs, by choosing to face their past, have taken the first step in breaking the cycle." Watson studied his friend, his mind turning over the pieces of the puzzle they had so carefully uncovered. "So, you believe Lady Larkspur has done the right thing, despite all that was hidden, even with the risks involved?" Holmes's expression grew thoughtful, and he leaned forward slightly, the faintest hint of a smile curling at the edges of his lips. "There is no perfect resolution, Watson, no choice without its consequences. But in facing the truth, Lady Larkspur has broken the chains of her family's past, and in doing so, she has allowed herself the freedom to choose a future that is her own." The warmth from the fire flickered in the room, casting shadows that danced along the walls. Holmes sat back in his chair, his fingers lightly tapping the armrest as he considered the path ahead. The case was, in a way, solved. The key to the Larkspur family's past had been uncovered, and though it had been hidden in darkness for so long, the light had now touched it, and with it, a form of release. But still, there was the question of the Ravenscrofts, their secretive nature, their entanglement in this dark history. Could they simply accept the truth without retaliation? Could they step aside, allowing the Larkspur family to move on with their lives? As if answering his own thoughts, Holmes spoke once more, his voice calm but filled with purpose. "The Ravenscrofts may not act immediately, Watson. They will bide their time, wait for the right moment to regain control. But it is up to Lady Larkspur and her family to hold firm now. The truth has been revealed, and with it comes the responsibility to live in the light." There was a moment of silence as Watson absorbed Holmes's words. They both knew that what had transpired could never truly be forgotten. The darkness that had been cast over the Larkspur name would always be there, but it would no longer have the same power over them. They had chosen to face it. Watson sat forward in his chair, his expression pensive. And what of the future for Lady Larkspur? Will she be able to rebuild, to live her life without the shadow of this legacy haunting her? Holmes turned his gaze to the fire, the flickering flames casting a soft light on his face. "She will rebuild, Watson. The road ahead may be difficult, but she is no longer trapped in the past. She has made a choice to live freely, and that choice, no matter how difficult, will ultimately give her strength. The conversation fell into a peaceful lull as both men settled into the quiet of the room. The truth, once revealed, had not brought devastation as they had feared. Instead, it had brought a sense of release, of closure, to a family that had been imprisoned by its own history for far too long. Several days later, Holmes and Watson returned to the Larkspur estate to check in with Lady Evelyn. The air had shifted once more, lighter now, as if the estate itself had been relieved of the weight it had carried for so many years. The gardens, once wilted and forlorn, now seemed to blossom with new life. Lady Larkspur greeted them with a quiet smile, though her eyes still held the deep sorrow of what she had uncovered. But there was something different about her now. A sense of resolution, a quiet strength that hadn't been there before. "Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson," she said softly, her voice filled with a gentleness that had been absent before. "I cannot express what your help has meant to me. My family and I are finally free from the chains of the past. I know it will not be easy, but we will rebuild. We will make sure the truth remains a part of our history, but it will no longer define us." Holmes nodded, a rare warmth in his eyes as he looked at her. "You have done the right thing, Lady Larkspur, and now you are free to choose the path ahead." The three of them stood together in the garden for a long moment, the wind gently rustling the leaves of the trees, the soft murmur of the river in the distance. It was a peaceful moment, one of quiet understanding. As they prepared to leave, Lady Larkspur turned to Holmes. "I will not forget what you've done for me, Mr. Holmes, but I know now that it is not just the truth that sets us free. It is the courage to face it, no matter the cost." Holmes smiled, a small, thoughtful smile. "It is the courage to choose, Lady Larkspur. That is what truly gives us the freedom to move forward." As Holmes and Watson walked back toward their carriage, the quiet of the Larkspur estate seemed to embrace them, as though the darkness that had once clouded the house had finally lifted. The mystery was resolved, not with the fanfare of dramatic revelations or shocking betrayals, but with a quiet decision to confront the past and step into the light. For all its dangers and uncertainties, the truth had set the Larkspur family free. And in the end, that was the peace they had all been searching for. Chapter 10. A final thought. The days following their return to 221B Baker Street felt different, as though the weight of the Larkspur case had left an indelible mark on both Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson. The fog that had clung to the streets of London had finally dissipated, revealing a crisp, clear sky. But even in the clarity of the daylight, there was a quiet heaviness in the air, a feeling that lingered, a subtle reminder of the complexity of the truth they had uncovered. Holmes sat in his usual chair by the fire, the faint glow of the flames dancing across his face. His fingers rested lightly on the arms of the chair, his expression unreadable as he gazed into the flickering light. His mind was no longer racing through the intricacies of the case, but it was far from idle. The events of the past weeks had left him with much to contemplate, and though the case was officially closed, the implications of it would echo in his mind for a long time. Watson, too, sat quietly across from him, a cup of tea resting in his hands. He had always been attuned to the subtle shifts in Holmes's demeanor, and today there was a quiet contemplation in his friend's gaze that he could not ignore. For once, the detective seemed less concerned with the next puzzle and more focused on something deeper. "Holmes," Watson said softly, breaking the stillness that had filled the room. "Do you think Lady Larkspur will be all right? After everything that has happened, I mean. She has faced so much, so many years of secrets and fear." Holmes's eyes flickered over to Watson, the sharp glint in them softened by something more reflective. "She will be all right, Watson," he replied, his voice gentle but firm. "Facing the truth is not an easy thing, but once one has confronted it, there is a certain freedom in knowing that the shadows of the past no longer control the present. Lady Larkspur has made her decision, and now it is up to her to shape her future. It will be difficult, yes, but the courage to face the past will give her strength." Watson nodded, still contemplating Holmes's words. "You believe it was the right decision, then? To uncover the family's past, to expose it all, no matter the consequences?" Holmes leaned back in his chair, his gaze never leaving the flickering flames of the fire. "The right decision, Watson, is not always the easy one. But in this case, Lady Larkspur's courage has set her free in a way that nothing else could. The truth has a way of breaking through even the most carefully constructed barriers, and in facing it, she has reclaimed control of her family's destiny." A quiet pause fell between them as the fire crackled softly in the hearth. Outside, the wind rustled through the trees, but inside, there was a calm serenity, as though the weight of the mystery had finally lifted. Watson took a slow sip from his tea, his mind reflecting on the events that had unfolded over the past weeks. The discovery of the Larkspur family's dark secrets, the uncovering of the Ravenscroft's involvement, and finally, Lady Larkspur's brave decision to confront the truth. It was a resolution that had come at a great cost, but it had brought a sense of closure, a sense of peace. "Do you think the Ravenscrofts will remain quiet now that the truth is out?" Watson asked, his tone tinged with uncertainty. The Ravenscrofts had always struck him as a family willing to go to great lengths to protect their secrets. Would they simply allow Lady Larkspur's decision to stand, or would they attempt to reclaim what had been revealed? Holmes's lips curled into a faint smile, though there was a hardness to it that spoke of his quiet certainty. "The Ravenscrofts may not act immediately, Watson, but they are a family built on secrecy and manipulation. The truth has shaken their foundation, but I do not believe they will let it rest. There will be consequences, of course, but those will be dealt with when the time comes." Watson exhaled slowly, the tension in his chest easing. "And what of Lady Larkspur? What kind of future can she build now, knowing what her family has done?" Holmes turned his gaze fully to Watson, his eyes sharp but filled with a rare understanding. "A future of her own choosing, Watson. That is the most important thing. She is no longer bound by the past. The truth may be a heavy burden to bear, but it is also the key to freedom. She may never completely escape the shadows of her family's actions, but she will live on her own terms." The fire crackled in the hearth, the sound of it filling the silence between them. For the first time in weeks, Holmes seemed at peace. His mind, usually a whirlwind of thoughts and deductions, now calm and clear. It was as though the resolution of the case had allowed him to step back from the tension and embrace the quiet after the storm. "The truth, Watson," Holmes said, his voice soft but filled with conviction, "is a powerful thing. It shapes us, guides us, and in some cases, it defines us. But it is also a burden, a responsibility that we must carry once it is known." Lady Larkspur's decision to face the truth was not just a personal one. It was a decision that altered the course of her family's history. Watson sat back in his chair, considering Holmes's words. And yet, in a way, she has found peace. A peace that could have been lost forever if she had continued to hide from the past. Holmes's smile grew faint, the softest hint of warmth in his eyes. "Yes, Watson, that is the strange thing about truth. It may bring discomfort, it may bring sorrow, but it is also the foundation of true peace. Once it is known, it cannot be forgotten, but it can set us free." The quiet of 221B Baker Street settled over them, a comfortable silence filled with the weight of the case's resolution. Holmes's mind was no longer racing through deductions or scenarios, for once he was content to simply be. The mystery of the Crimson Key had been solved. The Larkspur family's dark past had been exposed, and the truth had come to light. Lady Larkspur, in her courage, had freed herself from the shackles of her family's history. As the fire burned low, Watson felt a sense of calm settle in his chest. The tension that had gripped them for so long was finally dissipating, and with it, a quiet satisfaction. The case had ended not with a dramatic confrontation or an unexpected twist, but with a decision, an acknowledgement of the past and a choice for the future. Holmes stood slowly, his figure casting a long shadow across the room. He turned to Watson, his voice soft but filled with purpose. "The truth has been revealed, Watson, but the world will continue to turn. New mysteries will arise and new challenges will come. But for now, we rest." As Holmes moved toward the door, Watson sat back in his chair, the warmth of the fire wrapping around him like a gentle embrace. The case was over, and yet the peace it had brought lingered, settling in their hearts like a quiet reassurance. The past had been faced, the future was theirs to shape, and for the first time in a long while, the world felt still, silent even, but filled with the potential of what lay ahead.